Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Drivin with Duck. You can find it on YouTube, you can find it on Facebook, you can find it on Instagram, you can find these on TikTok now, multiple areas. I just want to talk to you guys about traumas. Now, all of us have our traumas, we have our vices, we have ways of dealing with either. And I especially want to talk about traumas because traumas typically have a negative association with them. They are negative things in our lives. But I want to talk to you more about something that I call trauma tracing now, that is not a clinical term, that is not something that you will find in any medical journal or in a clinical journal. Trauma tracing to me is where you can find the beginning point of a negative impact where your life took a turn that created a narrative for you to where your life is now headed, that a marker to why you do the things you do in your current state. This usually happens with interpersonal relationships, why people do the things they do. People sometimes will do things for a reason because of someone else. For example, people have a hard time trusting other people. When they have a hard time getting into a new relationship, they're like, oh, the last person I was with hurt me in such a way, so I have a hard time trusting you because of past traumas. Excuse me. Now, that's because people have unresolved trauma that they haven't dealt with yet, but yet they see fit to get in another relationship. I'm not saying that trauma is speculative. I'm not saying that trauma is not real. I am not saying that there are certain traumas that have a more painful degree. I'm not saying that some have a more severe degree. Everyone's trauma is personal. Everyone's trauma is subjective to them at how much it hurts. What I am saying is that sometimes people don't take the time to trace their trauma back to its beginning to understand it and overcome it in order to move forward with their lives. It is almost in the same respect as having a clogged faucet. They'd rather try and, stick a bucket underneath the pipe and say, fuck it, let it drip where it is, we'll still use the faucet, rather than fix it and have it run at its optimized efficiency. And they'll say, well, just let it rock out until it fully fucks up and falls apart and creates damage and dysfunction. This happens so much with people, and it's unhealthy in the way that when you deal with it as a person, because it can create havoc in other avenues of your life. Now, you can have someone who, was fully traumatized by their past relationship, and yet they'd rather say, you know what, I don't want to live my life alone. I don't want to live my life by myself. I don't want to live my life in this way, so I would rather move forward with someone else. So they start finding themselves going on a whirlwind of experiences with other people, but yet they never find anyone who meets all those markers for them that they want and experiences in another person, because they can't find anyone that fits the bill, but yet they still haven't dealt with the trauma from their past, because they're looking for a specific person, but yet that person doesn't exist because, again, they haven't dealt with their past trauma from that past relationship. But in reality, they're pointing their finger ahead, but they're not dealing with the past. That's the problem that we deal with. People have shitty childhoods, and they, may have been mistreated by their parents and stuff like that, and they have kids, and they want to do better for their kids, but they go in the total opposite direction because they went without so much from their parents, and their parents, neglected them, didn't give them anything, never gave them what they needed to succeed. So then they go forward and they have kids, and then they give their kids everything and don't temper what they give their kids. They don't let their kids want for anything. They just spoil the hell out of them, and it's going in the total opposite direction. And they don't understand, well, wait a minute. Just because my parents didn't give to me doesn't mean I have to overcompensate. with my own children. I have to temper myself. I need to really look back and think about, okay, what is it that really hurt me about my parents? What is it that really upset me about dealing with my parents? I need to deal with my past trauma. I need to really look back and understand what it was about my parents that upset me to this point. I need to really take the time and deal with that trauma. Because if I don't, it is going to bleed over into other avenues of my life. When we're talking about past relationships and people not dealing with those traumas and trying to go forward into other relationships, it spills over and you're taking the past trauma from that previous relationship and putting it onto someone else. It's like taking that marker from one person and putting that debt onto a whole other person. How fair is that? It makes no sense. Because someone else owes you. You put that marker onto a brand new person that didn't know you at that time. It makes no sense to make someone else pay that debt when you haven't dealt with that marker. You have to deal with that debt so you have a clean slate when you move forward. It's trauma tracing. You need to trace that trauma back to the source of where it started so you can heal that and move forward. Sometimes it doesn't have to go through a clinician. It doesn't have to go through therapy. It doesn't have to go through someone else. You don't have to talk it out with your friends. You need to work it out with yourself, because sometimes you need to deal with that person in the mirror rather than looking out the window. It goes much simpler. You don't need to bounce the idea off another ear. You need to bounce that idea off of your soul. And sometimes the hardest person to listen to is yourself. Because sometimes when you don't do that, you start to harden and you start to become criminally insane because you haven't traced that trauma back to where it goes. And then even more so, when you don't let go of the person that, you know, you're dealing with, sometimes you have traumas that go back to that same person that is still in your life that's unresolved, and now you think that trauma is over, but now you and that person that you thought you had resolved trauma with, you're creating new avenues of trauma because you didn't trace that original trauma. So now you're creating more problems. And you're creating an unhealthy experience in relationship with that person that you should have resolved the traumas with. That's why you need to trace it back to the beginning. See, I think I'm talking to a lot of people now, and I hope you're understanding what I'm saying. There are so many unresolved things. If you look at a lot of the experiences that we have now in the world, that is why there's so much vitriol and so much hatred amongst, races, amongst religion, amongst each other, amongst the sexes, so on and so forth, because people have so much trauma tracing to do and look back at the experiences that they've dealt with and unresolved trauma that they haven't dealt with inside themselves, not even necessarily needing a clinical person, but just looking inside themselves. If you did more of that, maybe we could understand, okay, I need to look inside of myself and figure out where my traumas come from and what I need to do to heal them. Because again, like I said, I think in a previous video, I heard it from one of my friend's mothers probably about 25 years ago, and I'll never forget it. When you point a finger at someone else, you point 3 back at yourself. So, but I always do this. Before I go to say to someone else, you did this to me, I have to always look at myself and say, okay, where could I have potentially went wrong? Where could I have communicated differently? What are the things that I have done that might have started this experience? And then once I run that down, I go to the person and say, okay, we obviously had a breakdown in communication. So let me start off by saying X, Y, and Z. And I never get straight to the yelling. I always try and break it down from a perspective of understanding to where we both have our chance to say what we got to say, so that if there's any misunderstanding, we could start it right at the level where we both can have a dog in the fight. And then if we both need to walk away, knowing that, hey, we're not going to be able to come to an agreement, that's fine. But at least we both got a chance in the beginning to trace our traumas back right to the beginning, and we can walk away and say, okay, we're never going to come to an agreement. That's fine. We can agree to disagree and walk away and both have our dignity, and that's fine. That's okay. Because that's what adults do. That's what's called growth. When you can trace your trauma back and say, okay, before this got too big, before this turned into a flood, before that leaky faucet got too big, got too out of control, we got a chance to stop it before it turned into a disaster. That's what it takes to be an adult. It's just something that was on my mind, but I think really, if you are in some type of bad situation, if you're in some type of negative experience, and you're finding yourself angry with people in your life, you're finding yourself upset, you're finding yourself in a bad way, you're finding yourself arguing with people in your life more than caring for them, you need to ask yourself, I need to trace this trauma back and see where it started. Because if I haven't done that, then obviously I'm doing myself a disservice, and I'm doing them a disservice by not figuring out where this trauma is. And you know what? If I can't find one with this person, then it's not them, it's me. And I need to go back even further to figure out where it started and why I have it and why I haven't dealt with it. This has been another Driving with Duck. Please, if you like this video, go back and check my other videos. I wish you all the best day. You can find my Driving with Duck videos on YouTube, Drivin with Duck. You can find me on Instagram, duckbeard_the_black. I wish you all the best day, and I wish you all the best week, and I wish you all serenity and a chance to change. Every day above ground is another chance. Reach out to those you love, and to those that you don't get along with, temper yourself and allow yourself the chance to figure out why. Love and light, my friends.